day everyone. I am Trisha and Eugenio, and today I'll be sharing insights from the reading entitled War of Extinction, focusing on political, historical, and cultural context that has shaped the ongoing struggles of the Lumad and Muru communities here in Mindanao. So let's start with some history. So for more than 300 years under Spanish rule, large parts of Mindanao actually stayed unconquered. The Lumad and Moro communities managed to keep their way of life, and they weren't as affected by Spanish colonial policies as other parts of the Philippines. So the reading says here that Mindanao has been belatedly sutured into the national narrative by virtue of its state as an unconquered island. Its Moro and Lumad population relatively insulted from the effects that colonialism brought to the local economy. So basically, Mindanao was left out of the national picture for a long time. But then everything changed during the American colonial period. As the Americans started big changes in Mindanao's economy and society, they brought in settlers from Luzon and Visayas and encouraged people to migrate. This transformed the population and economy very quickly. As the reading states here that the American colonial period brought in massive transformations by way of successful resettlement program that achieved in a relatively short period of time what the Spaniards were not able to do. So in simpler terms, the Americans succeeded in integrating Mindanao into the Philippine nation in a way that Spaniards never managed to do. So after that, Mindanao has become the focus of economic exploitation. Industries like logging, cattle ranching, plantations, and mining were established. At first, these were led by American business interests, but later on, Filipino elites took over this business. A constant feature in all these changes was displacement, as the reading states here that the displacement of the original inhabitants of the island, the Lumad and the Muro populations. That means that the Lumad and Muro people was pushed up or pushed out to make for business settlers. So in recent years, this situation has gotten even worse. So what's happening today is not just a random violence or a conflict, but according to the reading, what's happening is actually like a war of extinction. So the reading states here that a war of extinction as the mechanisms of the state through its armed forces and paramilitary groups are now poised to trample over resisting indigenous communities. So this means that there are efforts to silence or divide the Lumad and Moro peoples. And here's one of the most important points: the situations of the Lumad and other IPs goes beyond just discrimination. So the reading states here that the situation of the Lumad goes beyond experiencing institutional arrangements that disadvantage them. It is far worse than what the concept structural discrimination implies. So it's not just unfair treatment or biased laws. It's an entire system that aims to erase their communities and take over for their profits.
In the past year, the Lumad have been experiencing a host of human rights evolution in the hands of paramilitary groups on indigenous children. Indigenous communities and indigenous leader in 2015 Malikbayan ng Mindanao, a consortium of group published a brochure detailing the deer station of Lumad. Communities all over Mindanao, 87 Lumad school all over, are there attend with closure and 3 have cased operation in Targer. In harrowing circumstance, drawing more than 1,000 indigenous children out of school, more than 95 cases of attack against school recorded with the first 3 quarters of the year 2015. Service Foundation, MICP, and Barangay White Kaluman, Kataw-Taw, Bukidnon have been harassed by village officials, founded by the Philippines military. It was Forcibility closed last October 23, 2015 at 10 p.m. by armed men who barged into the school where 24 students and teachers were holding class. They destroyed the gate and began demolishing the school in front of the indigenous children coming from the Bulacan and Matigsalog tribes. In their volunteers teachers, leaving them a great trauma and shock.
In the early hours of November 12, 2015, armed men burned down another school serving Manubo High School. Children in Padiay Singabat, Agusan del Sur. The cottage where the volunteer teachers were housed as well as were equipment such as generator, seats, books, school supplies were kept erased to the ground. It is an extension of the Alternative Learning Center of Agricultural Youths from the Manubo and Banwaan, Higaonon. Talandig. Okay, the last September 1, 2015, the most harrowing and tragic incident involving the systematic attacks against indigenous schools occurred the closure of the Alcadef and alternative Lumad learning institutions was precipitated by the public institution of the school's executive director, Emerito Samarca, and indigenous leaders Liniolo Campos and Belo Senzo before its turn refers to the Magahat Bagani. The two leaders were shot execution styles in the front of the whole community, while the body of Samarca was later found in the classroom outside with his throat slit. In the late 2014 until the mid-2015, there were the Banwaan of Balit, San Luis Agusan del Sur. Last December 2014, who suffered under difficult conditions in the evacuation center, resulting to several deaths of the young and the old. They left their homes because of the intensifying militarization of their communities that led to serious human rights violations, which culminated in the assassination of their village leader. They only managed to return to their communities last March 2015 after the successful campaign of the community and support groups. And then there was the massacre of a Lumad leader and two other companies and the disappearance of a woman, a peasant leader and her husband in Pakibatao district last June 14, 2015. Military personnel reportedly struck the home of Ida Sisa, Secretary General of the local peasant association, killing Ruben and Lot, the leader of Nagakausang Lumad Magbubuma. Sa Pakibataw and a local peasant group, Randy Carnasa and Oligari Kimbo, local church leaders instantaneously. In Misamis Oriental was the evacuation of 52 families from two barangays of the municipality of Lagonglong after the military also encamped inside civilian homes. They established an evacuation camp at the provincial grounds in Cagayan de Oro last June 4, 2015 to dramatize their plight and managed to return home after a month when the military finally vacated their communities. A similar situation took place at the provincial grounds of Bukidnon in Malaybalay City. Last June 11, 2015, the whole Higaonon community of the Laputan, Cabanglasan left their homes to encamp at the capital grounds to decry the killing of a community leader, Franny Landas, and the harassment they have been experiencing from the Dela Mansperal military group. Then there is the news of Salugpungan Tatano, a Kanugun Community Learning Center, and the ISFI Academy being closed by no less than the Department of Education. upon the product of the military. They intend to replace these schools with institutions that are run by soldiers acting as power teachers, which prompted no less than Senator Miriam Santiago to point out the patent violation of the constitution of such a plan. Schools are zones of peace, which disallows armed groups, most especially state forces, to enter and meddle into their affairs.
The passage discusses the systematic attacks on Lumad schools and communities in Mindanao, especially the closure of schools like the Salugpungan, Tatano, Iganugon Community Learning Center and MISFI Academy. These schools were closed by the Department of Education, influenced by the military, who claimed they were linked to rebel groups. However, this act has been criticized as unconstitutional because the Philippine Constitution protects schools as zones of peace where armed groups, especially state forces, should not interfere. The reason behind these attacks, according to the text, is not truly about security but rather about economic interest. These Lumad communities and schools are located in remote, resource-rich areas rich in minerals or suitable for large-scale agriculture. These lands are targets of mining and other extractive industries which want to operate there. However, indigenous communities oppose these industries because they threaten their ancestral lands, culture, and way of life. The Lumad schools play a major role in uniting and educating these communities, strengthening the resistance. So, by closing down the school and harassing leaders, the government and its allies aim to weaken the unity of the Lumad people. This makes it easier for companies to enter their lands without organized resistance. Ang mga Lumad schools na ito ay nagsilbing sentro ng pagkakaisa ng mga katutubo upang ipaglaban ang kanilang karapatan at protektahan ang kanilang lupa laban sa mga mapaminsalang proyekto, gaya ng minahan at malawakang agrikultura. Kaya sila tinatarget, pinapasara ang mga paaralan, tinatakot ang mga leader at binubuwag ang mga komunidad dahil tumututol sila sa mga kumpanyang gustong pasukin ang kanilang lupain. Ang totoo, ang mga lugar ng Lumad ay mayaman sa likas na yaman, kaya gustong kontrolin ng mga kumpanya. Alam ito ng mga katutubo, kaya nila ito nilalabanan. Kapag nawala ang kanilang mga paaralan, hihina ang kanilang samahan at mas madaling agawin ang kanilang lupa. The attacks on Lumad schools are not just about alleged security threats. They are part of a larger plan to break indigenous resistance to mining and development projects that threaten their ancestral lands. Education strengthens these communities, so taking it away weakens their ability to fight back.